Welcome to the BC Search and Rescue Association's AdventureSmart Expert Webinar Series. Tonight, it's Ken Wylie, the founder of Archetypal.
Ken brings a wealth of experience to our stage tonight. His career spans many different roles, such as facility instructor, adventure programs instructor, outward bound instructor, author of the book Buried, executive director at Mountain for Growth, guide and coach, facilitator and owner-operator at Archetypal. Ken's lived a lifetime of intentionally placing himself in high-hazard situations in the mountains and other wild places. He's gathered a treasure trove of important lessons to share, which we'll learn from tonight with some of them. As a human hazard management specialist, Ken can help you and your adventure friends, and us actually, and search and rescue professionals as well, manage difficult situations and high consequence situations. He can help you discover how your choices at times negatively affect the outcomes of your efforts and give you strategies for elevating your responses. He'll help us with that. What Ken shares with you tonight ties in uniquely, as I said at the beginning, to one of our top 3 reasons for search and rescue in the province. The first one's injury. The second one is getting lost or disoriented. And the third one is exceeding abilities. And that's all about decision making and how you choose to manage your situation and your risks out there, mitigate them. Ken's sharing his insights and vast experiences, coupled with his career in human hazard management support, they definitely support our work here at helping to reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls. Ken, I'd like to welcome you to the stage, a virtual one at that, but the stage is yours, and we look forward to hearing your presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. Well, I really feel honored to be part of tonight's presentation, chiefly because I really believe that adventuring in the mountains is probably one of the more important things for humans to be doing, chiefly because it bolsters our connection to nature, and also because it's real. It's an authentic environment, and humans need authenticity, and also kind of to traverse consequence, to be in environments that have real consequence, so that we can learn how to manage situations effectively. I ardently believe that this is important for us because it affects how we show up to our families. It positively affects how we show up to our work, and and it builds into our society if we're a legion of good decision makers. So I'm honored to be part of tonight's session. I live on Vancouver Island, and I'm connected with the Malahat and Cowichan, nations. I'm building friendships in those communities, but more generally, I think, and more clearly, it's Coast Salish, West Coast Salish. So there's my land acknowledgement. And tonight, we'll look at values-based risk management. So as Sandra mentioned, this feeds into this idea of exceeding our ability, and our values of things like truth and courage and connection. They help us gain clarity, empowerment, and resilience. And so we'll give some strategies for matching our abilities with the challenges and adventures that we go on in the mountains. And we'll look at exceeding our abilities for ourselves, exceeding our abilities of the people in our groups that are exceeding our abilities, and also kind of underestimations of situations and the environment. under this heading of exceeding ability. As an overview, we'll look at clarity and empowerment and resilience, and then truth. We'll look specifically at truth and self-awareness under clarity. Under empowerment, we'll look at things that empower us by having courage and connecting with ourselves, others, and the environment. And we'll have a look at resilience, things like acceptance of ourselves, others, and the situation that we're in. And we'll have a brief discussion about intuition and how that feeds into our decision making, and whether or not we're connecting with our skill set, matching it really well with what's happening in the environment. So an overview of clarity, we'll look at truth and self-awareness and some subheadings under that. So about truth, how does truth fit into managing ourselves in wild environments in the BC backcountry? Well, if I'm getting ready for a trip, probably one of the things that I want to ask myself is, and be clear about with myself, are about my strengths and weaknesses related to the trip, and and to be particularly honest with myself, whether I'm ready for it or not. And I'm also want to pay attention to the truth about what my needs are. So I might have had a really hectic week and I really need to get out and go really fast and hard and kind of blow out some carbon from the week that's kind of stored in my body, and really have a kind of an intense experience. And that's okay, but to be clear about that is really important. Also, understanding so that kind of connects to my motivations and the kinds of things that are important to me on a particular weekend outing. And also to be truthful with myself about any issues that I have. I might have a sore knee, or I might have a cold, or I might be afraid of something in particular. The next step in truth is communicating these truths about myself to others. And this step is really important. To be able to tell people what my needs are and what my goals and motivations are, so that we can find ourselves in alignment, that's incredibly important. I've seen so many groups out there where one person's way ahead, and the person that, as I'm going down the trail, I come across one person and they're way ahead. And then I come across their partner and they ask me, did you see somebody in a yellow wind shirt? And I, can respond, yeah, I saw a person in a yellow wind shirt. They're about half an hour ahead of you. What's interesting about that particular scenario is, if anything happens to the person in behind, if they have an animal encounter or if they have an allergic reaction, they're no longer in a group. They're 100% alone. And so to be there for your partners is incredibly important. And it starts with understanding the truth about ourselves and our needs and motivations and desires. Then we want to do a little bit of sleuthing about what's going on for others, and have the same conversation on the drive out to whatever your destination is for the day. What do you need? It's a really incredible question to ask of somebody. What do you need? And it's really wonderful to hear that question and be able to respond. I can say, well, I actually need to go quite hard today. And then I might find myself in alignment with my partner. And also ask them about if they have any issues, any kind of health issues or things that are important to communicate. That piece of inquiry is really important, so that you can match the destination with your needs and desires. And last of all, what's the truth about the environment? What's happening out there? Is there going to be an atmospheric river while we're out there? Is it, do we have a terrible forecast? Is it going to be really hot? All of those things are important to clarify under the category of what's the truth, what's happening out there. Um, you may be even going to different environments, and to understand the truth, as many truths about that environment is incredibly important. Under clarity as well is self-awareness. Sometimes we mix up our identity with the activities that we engage with. For example, we may not, I wouldn't say that we are a hiker, but rather we are a person who likes to hike. And that distinction is actually really important. The reason why it's important is that if our identity gets too wrapped up in the activities that we do, then achievement becomes of incredible importance. The sides of Mount Everest are littered with people um, who couldn't let go of the summit, and and because, in part, because I believe their identity was too wrapped up to the success. Being able to let go, being able to identify ourselves as a person first is really powerful. And being able to let go of the achievement or the summit or whatever goal we may have set, um, really gives us a lot of space for better decision making. The other thing I'd like to chat about is the qualities, or human qualities. The self, the person that we are, um, is made up of a whole bunch of human qualities. Um, we might be intuitive, we might be nurturing, we could be emotional, we could be calm or silent or have volition, or we can also be concrete and analytical and expressive and assertive. All of these human qualities, the more we can embody these qualities, the better decisions that we'll make out there. In our Typically we call these qualities masculine and feminine, but the whole human being is a balance of both masculine and feminine qualities. And so it's really important that as a human being, we have the ability to be nurturing, so that if our partner's struggling, we can be there for them. It's also incredibly important to be analytical, know where to gather the information about where we're going and what we're doing. So all of those things are important for developing ourselves, and they are all skill sets that we have at our disposal should we choose to use them. The next category is empowerment. And here we'll be looking at courage, intellectual courage, social courage, emotional courage, and connection. Connection to nature, others, and animals. Intellectual courage. This is about gathering knowledge and details. But the courageous aspect of this is um, maybe to gather things that aren't typically in the norm. Bits of information that are a little bit different. A few years ago, I was on a hike on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and the map that we had for the area had campsites marked on it. And everyone was going to these campsites. And at lunchtime, I'd always kind of do a little poking around and, to see if there was kind of something different or a different place to camp. And invariably, I would always find find a treasure trove of places to stay. And so having the courage to, think outside the box is always going to help us. Um, and then to have the social courage of sharing those ideas. When we look at accidents, um, oftentimes what we can, when we interview those that were involved in accidents, somebody invariably says, I kind of had a sense, or I knew this was a bad idea, but I didn't say anything. Um, we have the misconception that courage means that we don't have fear, but that's not exactly true. Courage is feeling the fear and then thanking the fear for helping us become more aware of all the hazards involved, but then speaking our truth anyways. And that social courage is of incredible importance. And if you can develop social courage on your hikes and backcountry experiences, then that is a incredible development for our lives at home or at our work. And emotional courage. It took me about 25 years as a rock climber to be able to say to my partner, this climb scares me. But what was interesting when I started doing things like that, it would open a conversation. And the conversation was, what is it about this that scares you? And I would invariably say something, well, I just, there's a there's a ledge just below the crux, and if I fall, I'm going to hit that ledge. And then my partner might say, well, I've got a piece of gear that will fit really well in that section. And so our emotions are information. They're a treasure trove of information. And to be able to um, recognize that, oh, something's coming up for me and I need to be able to articulate it. Being able to say that to our partner um, is incredibly important. There was a woman by the name of Patricia Van Tighem who said to her partner back in the 1980s, I'm scared. I actually have a sense that something bad is going to happen. And she wasn't taken seriously. And so what eventually happened was she was sensing that there was a bear in the area, and the bear attacked them both. Um, and so there's this, the natural world has this, we have this complete connection with the natural world, and there's always stuff going on, and sometimes that information comes to us in the form of an emotion, and it might be fear. So to be able to communicate that is of incredible importance. Next under empowerment is our connection to nature. There's this incredible boat called the Hokulea. It's a Polynesian ship. And in the 1970s, the Hokulea started to navigate the Pacific without any instrumentation, just using their observations of what was going on. And since the 1970s, they've remastered their connection to the Pacific Ocean and to nature, and just using the wind and the birds and the stars and the sun and paying attention to what's happening, they've been able to rekindle their culture and their deep connection to nature. And we have the opportunity to do that in our British Columbia mountains. Keep our head up. Pay attention to what's happening with the weather. Which way is the wind coming from? Is it coming from the north? That means typically that we're going to end up in a high pressure. If it's coming from the south or southwest, wow, you know, the weather might be changing. That's a low pressure. So our connection to nature and using our observations um, empowers us in ways that is incredibly important. I would encourage all of you to develop your rudimentary navigation skills. Go back to map and compass. Because if this, you know, if your battery runs out on your GPS, then it's, you know, it's back to basics. So, and our connection to others, have real conversations on the trail, get to know the people that you're with, learn about the resources that they bring to the experiences that you have with them. Those conversations, asking them what their hopes are, their dreams are, their their fears, their strengths, their weaknesses, all of those pieces of connection um, will help you in your decision-making processes. Uh, and our connection to animals. Animals want the same things that we do. They want to be respected. There's a great story from Charlie Russell, who lived with the grizzly bear, raised a couple of grizzly bear cubs, and he wrote a book about it a number of years ago. He writes a story about how these campers were throwing garbage and rocks at this grizzly bear as it was wandering along the coast in the Kamchatka Peninsula. And that night, the bear returned in the middle of the night and attacked the people that were disrespectful. And animals just want space. They want to be respected. So think about what their needs are as you're traveling through the terrain where they live. In this, I took this photo of this bear, this mother grizzly bear and her cub, and it was taken with a telephoto lens. And we gave this bear plenty of space, and there was no issues. We let her know long in advance um, about our location, um, and we even backed up and gave her more space. If we're in a crossing a slide path where there's lots of alder and undergrowth, make noise. Try not to surprise animals like this. Develop a respect and a knowledge and connection with them. Learn as much as you can. I had another encounter a number of years ago with an elk in Banff National Park. I was running up Sulphur Mountain, and the mother, obviously the mother, I learned now that the mother had just um, had just given birth, and I tried giving her space as I was moving up the trail, but as soon as she came into my blind spot, she started to charge me. And we spent a little bit of time do-si-doing around a tree. And I eventually got up above her. And then I learned that they're height dominant. As soon as we get higher than them, they just go along their way. So I learned that if I put a hat on my ski pole, elk aren't gonna bother me because they're height dominant. And last but not least, resilience. And under resilience, we have acceptance. Acceptance of others. This is incredibly important, to accept the people that we're traveling with. We choose to travel with them. And so what that means is we're accepting how they show up. If they show up with a sore ankle or they're sick, it's important to acknowledge that and maybe adjust the activity that we do for the day. It's important to accept that others, if they have really high needs, So for example, they might want to do a trail run instead of the hike that you had planned. Um, and just see if that actually fits with yourself, um, and maybe come up with a different plan if that's not going to work. So this idea of accepting others and accepting how they're showing up, or accepting how, or something that might have happened to them, that's really important. They might have been stung by a bee and they're having trouble breathing. That's what's going on for them right now. When we are accepted on a adventure journey, we can feel it. And when we can feel that whatever is going on for us will be accepted, we're going to more easily share things that are happening for us or what our needs are. And that collaboration and that community is really important to build. Accepting the situation. Things that happen are all part of the experience and the journey. A number of years ago, I was teaching a rock climbing course, but I woke up with this tick bite on my back and I had to modify my day. My day started out with getting the students to extract the tick. And I needed their help. There's no way I could reach this. And they extracted the tick. And the other thing that needed to happen was I needed to go to the hospital to get a prescription for antibiotics. What happens is all part of it. And so to have that mindset, or to shift mindsets, we might have had a peak ascent planned, but to be able to pivot and shift mindset is incredible, an incredible skill set to develop. The other thing about accepting the situation is, if we're descending down the trail and we come across a icy or snowy section, take the time to manage the situation as best as possible. Oftentimes at the end of the day, we're tired and we're more looking forward to having a beer at, on the tail near the tailgate, and so we might start to reduce our diligence with managing hazards as we're descending. Remember this: accept the situation for what it is and manage it as best as possible. One of the great things that we have when we go out is we have a lot of freedom. And that comes with a responsibility to take care of ourselves and the people that we're traveling with. Accepting responsibility for ourselves and others will go a long way to help mitigate some of the issues that we might have with matching our abilities with the environment. In this, I took this picture, and it's way up on a peak on Vancouver Island, and these three girls wanted to look over the edge, and so the responsible thing to do would be to teach them how to do it properly. We can look over the edge. We can put our face right over the edge, but if we lower our center of gravity and lay right down, we can do so in a way that's really safe. So think about the most responsible way of dealing with a situation, and doing it in a way that we get to do what we want to do, while at the same time doing it in a way that is creative and adds a measure of safety. Intuition. Part of the having resilience out there is to develop our intuition. Intuition, I like to think of the intuition as kind of the little voice on our shoulder, kind of giving us guidance and direction. And I think we all have that. And so for ourselves, practice listening to that intuition. Practice listening to what's a good fit for me today? Um, what am I feeling? What am I sensing? And then being able to listen to the intuitions of others. Um, some people are profoundly intuitive and they, and it doesn't necessarily always mean that we're going to be, shortening our day or kind of cutting things short. It might mean that, well, things are fine. Even though it's storming out, things still feel fine. We're okay doing just what we're doing. I'm not sure if all of you experience this, but I have a sense that the mountains are sentient. They're definitely communicating with me, and sometimes they're they're saying, "Come on in. It's time to have a great day." And other times they're saying, today's a good day to kind of take it easy. And one of the things that we have a hard time with in our, kind of weigh and measure society, we can't weigh or measure intuition, but it's almost always certainly valuable to listen to it. And intuition isn't an emotion. It isn't fear or stoke. It's just a knowing. And it might show up as an emotion, but it's generally just kind of a calm knowing about whether something's for us or not. So hopefully some of these strategies will help you in managing, making a match between your abilities and your current abilities and your needs and desires, with the situations that you're about to step into, and finding a match between those two. Um, the clarity and empowerment and resilience, um, that will help you in make decisions in on your adventures this summer. I've got a space here for questions.
And we have questions. In fact, I was just going to remind folks that there's a little Q&A button along the bottom here in Zoom, and you can go ahead and hit that button, and we'll ask your question of Ken. We actually have a couple to start here, so just give me a second. I'll get rid of that slide. And now we're all in the Brady Bunch, as I like to call it, all together. So my first question is actually one that I had, and one of the advantages of asking questions is I get to ask my question first. My wife and I are trying to improve our fitness. So we intentionally try and sort of push each other and go further and do more and try and figure out, okay, how do we figure out whether or not this is just something where the second wind is going to kick in and we're going to be able to go a little bit further, or we've actually gotten to our exhaustion limit? Like how do you try and figure out the difference between, because I'm sure you've had it yourself, where you are going, you're going, you feel like you're fading, and then if you just go another half an hour, all of a sudden, yeah, you can go 4 or 5 more hours, right? How do you know the difference between that feeling where you're at a trough and you're about to go back up again, and when you're just at the end?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, and it's, one of the things about adventure that's really important is that we get to push those boundaries or learn to push those boundaries. And I've seen, in speaking about resilience, um, we can go way farther than we ever anticipated. However, having said that, have a backup. Like, carry enough with you that you can refuel. Um, and also, um, get to know your body through by progressively doing more and more. Get to know your body, um, and the stages that it goes through. So before you kind of go on the long, incredibly distant, long 20-mile remote run, do laps on kind of, your local hills, so that you build that understanding of yourself and your metabolism before you're way out there, right? And so it's kind of like going through the simulator if you're a pilot, right? Like, throw yourself some simulations, in an environment that is, closer to home and something that you can recover from. Yeah. So, and one of the most important things that I've ever done was these long trail runs, like just a beautiful experience where I get to go really far and fast and light but to develop the ability, the knowledge of my body beforehand is key.
Your thoughts, Sandra, on when you know if you've pushed yourself far enough or whether or not you should be pushing yourself further?
I think that's really uniquely individual. And depending on those group dynamics and having those honest conversations, I made so many notes when Ken was chatting about so many things. But even if there's just a few of you, or your partner, or your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, family member, you know each other a little bit more, and you know when you can push your other family member, let's say, or close friend, or not. And I think that's a unique situation to be in too, to be very empathetic of that situation, knowing that they can push through a wall, if you will, a moment, a time, a bonk, whatever it is, or not. And as that supporting person in that group, if you can push them and nudge them, whatever the way that is, through humor, anger, food, a snack, water, holding their hand, stopping for a break. We have to be very in tune, I think, with the other group members. That's easier done when we know them well, not so easy to do when we don't know them well.
That actually also, the other thing to remember is when you are on one of those troughs and you haven't gone back up to normal, that's also the time that you injure yourself, right?
Yes.
So we have to be a little bit more careful that we pay attention to our body as our body's saying, yeah, hold on, maybe it is saying I'll be able to go further if I just push another half hour through. But during that half hour, I might be more likely to trip on a route or something. Going on to that other question, we had a question here from Janet. What about when you are meeting up with people who you don't know or in a meetup group? How would you deal with that kind of scenario, Ken, where you're potentially with 10, 20 others, you've never met them before, and you're all going to do the BP Trail across North Vancouver?
That's a great question. And the reason why it's a great question is that it addresses the idea of social courage. It 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 can be challenging, especially when we don't know a group, to step up and provide leadership and to start a conversation um, about who we are, what we're bringing to the situation, what kind of challenge is going to be appropriate for the day. All of those things are incredibly important, along with, okay, so the expectation is to stay together, all of those kinds of things. In a newly social situation, when the norms haven't been set, that's the time to set some norms, to step up and provide some leadership. Maybe even what can help are some templates. Like, look for templates on in the trip planning tools that will help you kind of have a checklist. And this is that way you have kind of like this this is the checklist that I've gotten from so and so, or maybe even AdventureSmart, where this is a trip planning process that I go through. All of those tools will help us have these conversations with the people that we're going with. And those conversations, it's really takes a lot of courage to have them in the parking lot, or wherever
Yeah.
the social situation has dumped you. But to have them beforehand is incredibly important, because once you go out on the trail and we haven't had the conversation about staying together, or what the expectations are, or how we're going to manage the situations as a group, if we haven't had those conversations before we start, it's too late. It's off to the races, and people are on their own, and then we might be wondering, so why did I sign up for a group trip?
Yeah, and the other advantage, of course, of starting the conversations early is it also means you get to meet people early, and then you
Yes.
are sort of ice breaking, getting over that initial thing, and then you can end up having a chat with someone or find someone who's maybe matched to you in the speed that you travel, and you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit slower. I'm going to be right ahead, and oh, you know what, I'm feeling like I'm going to be right ahead as well. So let's be in the front of this group and run ahead and radio back any
Mhm.
concerns that we have, et cetera.
To
Uh,
add to that, we might have a voice that says, well, who am I to, start leading this conversation?
mm,
And the answer to that is, well, who are you not to? Right? Like,
yeah.
we're all exposed to consequence. Like if there's a consequence that happens, we're all exposed to that. And so, yeah, to have that conversation is so important.
The next question was we're sort of on the same theme here. Um, let's say you do get to a difficult conversation, you get to a point where, and this happens with myself and my wife occasionally, I'm, like I said, needling my wife to try and go a little bit further, a little bit longer. And she's saying, you know what, maybe this is time to stop. Now, when that happens, we sort of have our own dynamic because we've been hiking with each other for a long time. But if these are friends we haven't really necessarily hiked with for a while, but I don't know, you go and you meet them at the bar occasionally. Uh, how do you have that conversation when it's like, you know what? Yeah, I recognize, according to the map, I'm 750 meters from the peak, but I am past my peak and I'm not going to be able to get there. How do you have that conversation?
Well, that's the social courage speak is piece is to say it, like I'm not going to be able to make it. And one of the things that's really important is that we're there for the people that we've just chosen to be with. Like that's important. My partner Julie lost a friend to a bear attack, and and um, and it was chiefly because the group decided to split, and there was she was alone. And if they had chosen to stay together, it likely wouldn't have happened because we know that bears in groups of 4 or more, are much more reticent to attack somebody. And so there's all of these unintended consequences by splitting up. And so like if it's just even if it's 200 meters to the summit and somebody can't make it, that's what we signed up for. We signed up to be together.
There's always next weekend, I guess, right?
The
We can
summit
do it
will
again.
always be there. And what a thing to build into our relationships, right? Like to be there for each other.
It's a good point because
Well,
it
and
does
I think
show empathy.
Mhm.
it does, and it ties into, let's say they didn't choose to empathize and someone went beyond their abilities. It goes right back to getting back to
Mhm.
the beginning of a presentation tonight, and third reason for calls in BC is exceeding ability. So that conversation here tonight is tying into that piece really. Let's say there was not enough empathy, or there wasn't understanding or social courage or listening by
Mhm.
others, then they could be exceeding their abilities, feeling they need to keep up, keep going. Maybe this is their ride home for whatever reason, right? Oh, it's only 200 more meters or what have you, even though they've reached their limit.
Mhm.
This could be that time, right? Where search and rescue volunteer like Scott is filling out the form, and the reason for the call is they exceeded their abilities.
For many years, I taught avalanche courses, and one of the things that I would do during the course is stop 50 meters or 80 meters below this summit that we would go toward. And we'd have lunch. And after lunch, I'd take my skins off, and people would say, well, what are you doing? The summit's right there. And one of the key lessons in avalanche education is to be able to let go of the objective based on the conditions. And that can be really hard for people. And part of the conditions are what's happening in the group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Les mentions that no one plans to get lost, but you have to have a plan to. No one plans to get lost, but you have to have a plan to survive, right? We talk about our 3 Ts: trip planning. That's the stuff you do in advance, and possibly at the trailhead, depending on where you are. But nowhere later than the trailhead. You should be already planned by the time that you're leaving. Training, which is stuff again you do in advance, that you know all the stuff, and then taking the essentials. Now, what Les argues is that learning how to have tough social conversations is part of training for the backcountry. Do you guys agree that that
Absolutely.
makes sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know a lot in our curriculum and programs that we deliver, and you've heard me say it, Scott, before, we need to think of those what ifs, think of those scenarios, think of those challenges, and make them up. Make them up if you have to. I think you can come up with scenarios left and right. You know, Sandra breaks her ankle, Sandra bonks, use me as your example, and make me fail, let me get hurt. I didn't bring a map or compass or food. And come up with a scenario that you can say, okay, what do we do now? What's our role for each of us? So I think it's really important to do that.
Back to your point, Ken, that's actually a good idea. If there was to be a template, one of the templates would be asking everyone in the group, okay, this is at the trailhead and in the meetup scenario where you haven't met anyone else. Okay, folks, before we go, let's do a quick discussion about what happens when we are 250 meters from the summit and we have to turn around. How comfortable are you with that? What is our plan for that? And see what the group says. And you know what? You can actually split a group of 20 into 10 and 10.
Oh, yeah.
That's perfectly safe, right? The problem is when you split a group of 5 into 1 and 4, that's when things get a little tricky.
Two very famous climbers, Peter Habler and Reinhold Messner, summited Everest together in the 1980s without oxygen, the first two to do this together. And one of them, I won't say who, was drawing arrows in the snow up, and one was drawing arrows in the snow down. And up won, and they both succeeded, but they never climbed together again.
Yep. I just want to point out, Robert has thoughts on the 10 essentials for hikes. We're actually going to put on a little video in a couple of minutes here about all three, the trip planning, the training, and taking the essentials. And I'll put it in a link in the chat for you, Robert, that has a link to what we consider to be the essentials. Now, it says you asked about 10 essentials, which is interesting because we don't actually think about 10 essentials anymore because it really depends. If you're going for, as you suggested, a short loop around Lynn Canyon Bridge, your essentials might be different, or they will be different than if I am going to be going up at Joffrey, or if I am going to be going up into the Alpine and I need to have microspikes. So trip specific essentials, condition specific essentials. My essential also includes an inhaler because I happen to have asthma, right? So there's going to be person-specific essentials as well. But I'm going to put a link to all of that in the chat. I have one quick question before we flip over to the video. What does archetypal mean?
Archetypal. Archetypes are a picture or an idea of how of a person, and so so an archetype of a warrior, you know, that's just popped into your head. However that shows up for you. An archetype of a wizard, an archetype of a healer or a teacher. Those are all just kind of how we can show up in situations. And the reason why my company is named Archetypal is that it helps people become aware of how they're showing up. Am I showing up as somebody who, am I showing up as an addict, right? Like I have to achieve this thing no matter what. Or am I showing up as an alchemist, able to kind of, you know, change the situation for, or kind of metabolize the situation for what's needed, right? And so, yeah, archetypes are, they're very Jungian. I think he coined the term, but it helps us understand the human condition and perhaps how we're showing up to different situations.
We are going to play a little video now. Everyone stick around because we're going to give away some things at the end, but this is actually going to speak specifically to the question earlier about trip planning, taking the essentials, and training. Those are our 3 T's. When we come back, we can do a quick giveaway for a Bright Source lamp or a Reco reflector. Hang tight.
So, you want to be AdventureSmart.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But what is being AdventureSmart?
Being AdventureSmart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the AdventureSmart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be AdventureSmart.
I could whistle that all day.
We've heard it a few times, haven't we? And I know some of our guests have been here for a few of our sessions, so we appreciate the repeat customers, that's for sure.
So it is great to have everyone here, but we do want to actually give away some stuff. I think we actually have a lamp from our supporter BrightSource. Is that correct?
We do. We've got 2 giveaways, and I've got a couple of questions. And how we work this is you get ready to answer them really quickly. So get your fingers ready. Scott gets his eyes ready because he's going to pick the first person to answer the questions.
You're doing it in the chat, by the way.
Thank you. Doing it in the chat. And it's from Ken's presentation. So I know I learned a lot tonight. It was so insightful. I've got some notes. I'm going to come back and listen to bits of this again. It was really as unique as I thought it would be and more. So Ken, thank you for that very much. I really appreciate it. It hit a different nail on the head than what we usually share with these webinars. And I think it was a great addition to our summer series. I'm so glad we had you to join us tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ready for the questions? Okay, let's get the audience ready. This pertains to Ken's conversation tonight. So I found this one interesting because he was very, he had social courage. Ken did, as he should, and shared, and I thought it was interesting. So can you tell me, what did Ken admit years ago on a climbing trip to his climbing partner? He admitted something, and I found it really interesting at what he admitted, because I don't think I've heard someone say that before on any adventure that I've been on. I've felt it. I haven't expressed it that way, but I thought the way you just shared it so clearly was important to touch on.
Rachel, Tracy, Janet, Katrina, Les, everyone got it right, and it was that that climb scared him, and it's important to have that, be able to be comfortable enough with the people you're to tell them what you're feeling, and it's a pretty awesome thing to do.
Yeah, I got a lot from that, actually, that social courage. He talked about it in so many layers, Ken. I found it really interesting. That one was very transparent. It was a share at a time and a place. And maybe I have these conversations sometimes with myself if I'm going down a certain part of the trail on my mountain bike, and I'm like, this scares me, and I take the chicken run or something. But that's okay too. That's okay too.
Okay.
It is okay. Yes, I don't have to go down or over or in the air at all. The next question here, so everyone's ready for the next question. So thank you. That was for the BrightSource light. This one will be for the Reco reflector. Can you fill in the blank? I found this one really helpful too, and a light bulb went off many times. This one did. So fill in the blank. Our emotions are, and can you fill in the blank there? I found this one. It is a little bit tricky. Hopefully everyone else was listening and maybe thought that was as insightful as I did.
I thought it was insightful, but I do think you're going to have to give a bigger clue, because he did say your emotions are, and then there would have been a number of good filling in. So we're going to have to do some more here.
Okay. The short form, I'm going to have to play charades, verbal charades here. The short form version of the answer only has 4
we got
letters.
one.
Okay.
We got one, yes. So a number of different people. By the way, I just wanted to mention, we'll take the first person on the list, and we'll be contacting you via the email that you registered with, in case you're wondering how this works. But we did actually have people say, one person said our emotions are indicators, and I do think he said that emotions are good indicators. Another person said our emotions are speaking to us, trying to tell us something important. It definitely was part of the message. And one person did actually say the word, our emotions are information, which I believe was the exact wording you were looking for.
Absolutely.
It was the exact wording I was looking for. And that's what caught me. That so many things did. That's what caught me. So thank you everyone for playing our game. Appreciate it. There's a couple prizes for you. We look forward to welcoming you back at our future remaining webinars as they fold out over the summer. They're Thursday night, 6 p.m. It's the same time, same bat channel, if you will, different guests, different topics. Scott, thank you again for all your tech support. And if anyone wants to see this again, check out the BC Search and Rescue Association YouTube tomorrow. Scott will be busy, thankfully.
And it's actually really important, because this session, if you're going with someone else, get them to watch this session, and then you're both going in with the same information. So if you're going to head out, you know what? Hey, let me send you this YouTube. Do you want to watch it? You can even watch it at 1.5 times speed, so that we can see like we're talking like Alvin and the Chipmunks. But it's important to come in with the same level of expectations, and then you might have a more successful backcountry adventure.
Good points. Good points. And I wish you all a great summer. And thank you for joining us so that we can collectively, us included, Scott and I. Scott's a search and rescue volunteer. I work for BC Search and Rescue Association. We love to play outside too. So it's a collective effort, Ken included, to help reduce the number and severity of search and rescue calls. They donate more than 441,000 hours a year to search and rescue training and education. So you being here tonight helps them for sure. So on behalf of the 3,400 members, thank you. Have a great summer, and we'll see you in the future at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.